Welcome back to Rollin With Olan. I'm Jeff Olan, your host. Today, I have a friend of mine who actually is another neighbor. It's crazy because this is how it works in Hollywood. And some podcasts ago, episodes ago, I had on Ron Merrick. He's all in animation, and now I've got on Mike Ellis, who is into Unscripted. Let's talk, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks, Jeff, for having me on. I really appreciate it. I'm super excited to talk to you about the unscripted space.
Fantastic. Hey, yeah, Mike. Look, you've been in the reality space for a while, but let's get started from like when you were. I read somewhere that when you were 12 years old, you got into the biz. Can you tell me about your childhood a little bit?
Yeah, so I'll kind of give you the whole kind of the spiel of when I was younger. Um, I grew up in the Los Angeles area. I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, and kind of grew up in Hollywood, right? Like I have a bunch of family that's in the entertainment industry. If my family is basically, if you're either in the entertainment industry or they're in the psychology industry, and the people in the entertainment industry need the people in the psychology industry, right? Um, and so I went to a performing arts school in for middle school for like junior high, and in seventh grade they put a camera in my hand, and that was kind of it. I went for this kind of little like welcome luncheon, and they put a camera in my hand, and I absolutely loved it. And at the time, I was much more interested in being like on screen, right? Like I wanted to be an actor. And so in like sixth grade, I was in the acting class, and we put on some shows. Because again, we went performing arts magnet, and I saw these cool kids with walkie talkies, right? And like, what 11 or 12-year-old doesn't want a walkie talkie? So I decided to take stagecraft the next year. And as I'm sitting in class for stagecraft, the magnet coordinator comes in and says, "Hey, who wants to learn how to make movies?" And my arm went immediately up, like it shot up, and that was kind of it. So they got about 12 of us, maybe. They started pulling us out of classes to kind of teach us these things. And by the end of the first semester, it was me and maybe two other people. And by the end of the first year, that was it. It was just me. To the point where like they started a whole film class that I essentially had to co-teach with the teacher there, because
Really?
he didn't really know about film or anything like that. It was a science teacher that had maybe done like one film class or something like that. And that was kind of it, right? I went to Grant High School from there, which is not really in my area, but I went there specifically because they probably have one of the best, or had one of the best film programs for high school students in probably the entire United States, if not the world. Our films were competing with like USC and Cal Arts and UCLA and like colleges out of while we were in high school. And so that's kind of how I got my start. From there, I knew what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. So I went to Valley College for a couple of years because, the film industry is very expensive, and you never know when your next job is going to be. So I tried to do it as inexpensively as possible. And then went to
Yeah.
California State University, Northridge, and got my degree in screenwriting, actually.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because obviously you got the bug really early and you stuck to it, which a lot of kids, they're out playing, they're doing this, they're trying five different things, and so you stuck to it, which is great. Congratulations on that. That obviously puts you where you are nowadays. But yeah, so you went to California State, you studied screenwriting. Did you start then writing?
Yeah, so after I graduated, I mean, originally I wanted to be a writer director, right? And that was kind of the path you went down when back in 2000, I always want to say 2008, 2009, 2010, right? Like people weren't really coming out of editing, people weren't coming out of any other disciplines really. It wasn't until about 2 or 3 years later that they started to. So I spent a ton of time writing. I probably put in close to 20,000 hours into writing. I was working full time, and I'd write every single day after work from 5 till about 8, 9 o'clock at night. And I do that 4 days a week, and then I would write on Saturdays for like 5 or 6 hours a day. And tried to
That's
make it as a
incredible.
writer. Yeah, tried to make it as a writer. It's super, super hard, even with all the connections that I do have. And kind of just fell into the unscripted space.
Yeah. So did you get into at the time? Did you get into the Writers Guild and all that?
No, no, I didn't get into the Writers Guild. I had a couple of scripts that finished. I finished in the top 10% of the Nichols Screenwriting Fellowship, which is probably the most prestigious writing competition.
Mhm.
It's sponsored by the Academy. Finished in the top 5% of the Universal Emerging Screenwriters Fellowship, which is a fellowship that they only accept 500 applications. They only take 5 people. You got to have like 2 really solid scripts. You've got to have, people in the entertainment industry write you letters of recommendation. Like, it's super hard to get into. But no, never really didn't get into the Writers Guild, never sold anything. It's so hard and so competitive out there, to do that. And even, like I said, even with the amount of writing that I was doing and the connections I had, it just didn't work out that way.
Yeah, it's a tough business. It, yeah, it's a tough business, Mike. We both know that it's a really tough business, no matter where you're at in it. And so, somewhere out of college, one of your first jobs, you landed with veteran unscripted agent and producer Bill Thompson. Can you
Yeah,
tell us about that? Because that was pretty
yeah.
early on, wasn't it?
Yeah, I was fairly early on in my career. It was my first foray into the unscripted business. I started working for a company called Critical Content. Critical Content was originally part of Relativity Media. Relativity kind of folded. The only thing that was really profitable was their unscripted business. So a guy by the name of Tom Foreman kind of broke off and started Critical Content. And the way it really operated was really interesting because it was almost like 2 separate businesses. One side was like the internal Tom Foreman, Cynthia Stockhammer, like people developing on the internal side. And the other side was all the pods or the producers of overall deals. And that's the side I was on. So I started working with Bill and a guy by the name of Troy Sear, who now runs New York Post Entertainment. He's the president of the New York Post Entertainment. And was quickly promoted within about 3 months to pod coordinator. So I had, want to say 13 different pods that I was kind of in charge of and managing and making sure that I had every single one of their ideas in my brain. And they all had 30 different projects going on at once. So, had to coordinate, Pitch Fest that we had, which was basically we'd have an exec come in from a network and we'd rotate in all the different producers' overall deals and they'd pitch their 3 shows and I'd have to develop and I'd sit in on meetings like that and pitch my own projects. And it was a whole thing. It was a lot of work, let me tell you. But, it held my feet to the fire and that's kind of trained me to kind of expect the unexpected.
Yeah, well, you talk about that. That's kind of, yeah. You were promoted pretty early on, from what I read. You were promoted. That's why you're saying, you were developing your own shows at that point in time, pitching projects, creating decks, producing sizzles. That's a lot of work for one person who's just like being thrown into it. So you certainly have learned along the way.
Yeah, look, I've been working with Bill for a very long time, and Bill's become kind of like a mentor for me and a big brother. And the great thing about Bill is that he kind of just threw me in the deep end and said, go figure out how to swim. And he comes from the old school agenting world. He's been in the business for over 25 years. He came up in ICM and then was promoted to being an agent, then went out to be a producer with Mark Wahlberg, and they partnered on a couple of projects. From there, he moved over to Critical Content, which is where I met him. And again, him coming from the old school kind of, prepared me for what you can expect working in this business, right? Like, no task too small, no task too big, just kind of figure out and make it work.
When I read his name, I knew who he was, and I'm not even in the reality space area. And honestly, I mean, years ago when reality TV was just starting out, those of us in mainstream TV, we thought it was just a fluke. But now it's like a $30 billion a year business. It's incredible. I mean, boy, how the move, as they say, how the needle has moved. It's really incredible.
Yeah, look, we're kind of in a transition as well right now. Everything, the reality business and just general the entertainment business is kind of falling right now. We're kind of in a free fall. It kind of started happening when the Warner Brothers Discovery merger happened. That was kind of the first domino to fall, but it's kind of been a mixture of different points on why the business is currently in the state it's in right now. Besides the executives and the C-level suites, making these decisions, a bigger part of it is just how people are spending their time. And right now, people, especially Gen Z, millennials, and Gen Alpha, just aren't spending their time watching television anymore like they used to. They're spending their time, on social media like Instagram and TikTok. They're spending their time playing video games. People don't realize how much video games make per year. They make more money than movies and TV combined, and have been for about the past 15 years. And the last one, which is the really big one, is YouTube. YouTube is the biggest streamer in the world. For the first time this year or late last year, more people were watching YouTube on their televisions than they were on their phones or their computers. YouTube is kind of the future of the business, and I'm actually pushing a lot of my clients to kind of get into that world. I look at it the same way as the transition that happened between radio and TV. So like in 1948, I believe there were like 8,000 households with televisions. By 1959, there were like, I want to say like 50 million households with televisions or something like that. Like some outrageous number. Like it just jumped, right? And look, people stopped listening to the radio dramas and kind of left sitting in front of the radio to go sit in front of the television. And we're kind of in that same transition right now. People no longer sitting in front of their cable box. They're now sitting in front of YouTube and watching YouTube. And look, there's a spot for radio, right? Like people are still listening to the radio. People still listen to podcasts, right? Like even when they're not just driving. So there's a space for radio. Just like there's always going to be a space for television, right? Like television is not going to disappear. It's just going to change how we watch it and what we're watching on it.
Yeah, I mean, that makes perfect sense. And you couldn't be more spot on with your answer there, or just telling me about it. I mean, it's crazy to think about it. I want to get into a few other things. Obviously, I'm going to get into what you're doing presently. But before that, tell us about developing reality shows. Like, what can you tell us about what's the process of developing a reality TV show?
Yeah. So, it depends on the type of reality show you're developing, right? So there's kind of different genres. There's the shiny floor shows, and we're talking like Masked Singer and The Floor and America's Got Talent and those things. And then you've got the docu-series, right? The follow docs like the Kardashians and, the D'Amelio twins and things like that. And then finally, you've got true crime, right? Those are kind of the realms and the areas that people are in. I mean, another one that's been blowing up the past few years is sports, right? And that's because of the big Netflix push into the sports genre. It used to be the two hardest things to sell in reality TV was music and sports, two of my favorite things. And now sports has kind of come back and come back in a big way. But let's kind of we can kind of go over each one, kind of talking about first, I guess, the shiny floor idea, right? It's all about the idea. What's the hook? What's that big centerpiece that people are looking for? So, for example, The Voice. The Voice has the spinning chair. That's the big centerpiece in that. So first you kind of want to develop what that big centerpiece is. And once you've figured that out, you want to create a deck, which is basically a PowerPoint presentation on what the show is, how the show works, all that good stuff. And then potentially create what's called a sizzle, which is maybe a 2 to 3 minute short, I want to say almost trailer for the show. It kind of breaks it down, shows you what the show is about. And really, when you're developing any show, those are kind of, once you get past the development process in creating what you're creating, it's kind of the same. You're just going to make a deck and you're going to put together a sizzle. It's the same thing for like a follow doc, right? Like a docu-series, like Vanderpump or Kardashians or something like that. The key with that, though, is character. Character is absolutely key with it. If you don't have good characters and they don't pop off television, nobody's going to be interested in watching it. Those shows have actually become really hard to sell now. I mean, look, everything's super hard to sell now just because of the state of the business. But those shows especially, because it's so hard to just break out new talent nowadays. It's easier to, and networks are more open to taking talent that was on a show and breaking them off and starting their own. Like, so for example, The Valley is a great example, right? The Valley is broken off from Vanderpump Rules. And these people already have established names. People know who they are. These network executives are scared to take chances and risks, understandably, right? Because like one thing could mean their job. So they're going to go the easy route. They're going to go the route that they know that people are going to show up for. So, you know, whether that's IP, intellectual property, whether that's a big true crime series, right? Like that's why you always see things on like John Bonet or, you know, on OJ or something like that, right? Or big shiny floor shows that have a hook, right? Or have known to work in other territories, right? So a great example of that is like The Masked Singer. The Masked Singer was a huge hit in South Korea, and they brought it over here because they knew that there was already an audience that had been watching it. So it's easy for an executive to go out and say, hey, look, to their bosses and say, look, this is performing well over here. It's going to perform well over here in the United States.
Right. 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 You know, I totally get that. And, you know, like you said, there's so many different layers to it and so many different shows that you could actually be doing. And you, what you do now, I want to get into, you know, you're in management now. You actually have joined forces once again after all this time. You've joined forces with Bill Thompson again. And you guys have artist group Unscripted.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. Because
Yes.
look, I know from reading your bio, but please share with the audience.
Yeah, so it goes back a little further than that. So at the top of, I want to say 2021, Bill calls me up, and at the time, because of the pandemic, I had been out of the business for about a year, just like a lot of people had been. And Bill calls me up and says, Mike, I'm now running the Unscripted team at Verve Talent Literary Agency. So for those of you who don't know, Verve is a very prominent literary agency with a side of talent and unscripted. And Bill was kind of running the Unscripted team. And he's like, look, you know everybody in town, you know how to develop, you know how to sell, you're great with people, come be an agent with me. And I said, well, you know, I grew up listening to punk rock, right? Like I had a mohawk in high school, green hair, blue hair, and like the agency world and trying to play politics was never for me, right? Like I was never one who was going to climb the corporate ladder and always having to look over my back for people who's going to stab me in the back. Because that's what you hear when you're at these agencies, right? It's very corporate. It's like, I'm going to climb the ladder and I'm going to pull you down if I can get a leg up. And I went over to Verve because I'd been out of the business for a while and I loved working with Bill. I said, all right, let's try it out. And I get to Verve and it's a completely different animal. Verve is one of the best places that I've ever worked. The people there were awesome. They don't have divisions like most other agencies. They have teams. It's a group effort there. It's not an individual business, because when you're an agent, you're almost like in your individual owned business. And if you're not bringing money in, what use are you to the agency kind of thing. Verve was very different, cut from a different cloth. Bill ended up leaving. I stayed on for a little bit longer. And when the strike started to come down, when the strike was going to come down, I knew that it was going to be a very long strike. It was going to be like 2008 all over again, because Unscripted is kind of the canary in the coal mine. Our business had already been suffering, and that had started with, the merger of Warner Brothers Discovery. They stopped buying because they were restructuring. Netflix price dropped dramatically. CBS cut their budgets by $1 billion. NBC cut their budget by $1 billion. Like, we just knew that there was no money, and these writers and these actors and directors, rightfully so, were asking for more money. And so, like, it just wasn't there. So I knew that this strike was going to be a long one. So I said, look, if I want to get back into producing, now's the time. So I left Verve and kind of went out on my own, decided to go out and say, hey, I'm going to be a producer again. And about 3 months later, Bill hit me up and said, hey, I'm starting this management company with a bunch of clients that we had at Verve. But the difference is that we're not going to be agents anymore. We're going to have our feet in the production and development pool as well. And so that's really what attracted me to it. I got to continue to work with the clients that I loved while I was at Verve, but we also get to develop our ideas or work with our clients to help them develop their projects, right? Like, we were kind of like that when we were at Verve. The difference is that we just weren't getting credit for the development process. We really acted almost like VPs of development for our production companies and our clients, rather than just agents, right? And I think that's what really set Bill and myself apart, is that we're able to see a project not for what it is, because most agents will see a project and say, well, if I can't make money off this right now, it's not worth my time, it's not worth your time, so move on to something else. We'll see a glimmer of an idea and be able to say, well, what if you change this way or that way? And those slight changes can make all the difference and really make it sellable.
Yeah. I totally understand that. And I mean, you guys represent some big people over there. You represent EPs from several different shows. The EP of Queer Eye, the EP of America's Got Talent, the director of Ridiculousness, co-creator of Pawn Stars, and creator of the Masked Singer, like you said earlier, and others. But you've got a really good clientele.
Yeah, what's so interesting is Bill and I have kind of separated out the business. He handles a lot of the international stuff. So we're making a big splash into the Asian marketplace. So we represent Wanu Park, who is the creator of The Masked Singer. We represent TVSI as well as TBS, Tokyo Broadcasting Systems. And a lot of that is Bill's push. Super smart. He saw the opportunity there and kind of jumped at it. I handle a lot of the development and a lot of the staffing when there is staffing to do for our clients. So, I'll work with our clients to create decks. I'll help take projects from Japan. That's a big thing of what we're doing right now, is we're taking a lot of projects from Japan and Korea, and we're redeveloping them for an American audience. And so we'll figure out, which of our clients may fit something like that, right? And we'll work with them to kind of develop the project together, and all of us take it out as one entity.
Yeah, so there's a lot of reality shows then, like in Japan and other countries around the world.
Yeah, so there's a big business there. One of the companies that we represent also is WTFN, which is Australia's biggest independent production company. Working with them specifically, because I've been working with them for a long time, it goes all the way back to my time at Critical Content. They were one of the pods over there. It's really interesting the way the rest of the world works versus the way the US works with regards to how shows are sold. So because the rest of the world doesn't have the same amount of money that our networks do, they will sell shows to different territories, almost more so like the independent film business, right? When you're in the independent film business, you do what's called pre-sales. So you'll go out and you'll have an idea and you'll go to like AFM, the American Film Market, or you'll go someplace like that, and you'll go sell your movie territory by territory. You'll go to Belarus, you'll go to France, UK, Australia, and you'll sell them each a piece of the movie, and they get the rights to distribute the movie for a set amount of time. The reality show business kind of works the same way internationally. So they're more on the licensing. They operate more on the licensing side of the business. So they'll sell their show in their territory, but then they'll go out, and if they can't raise the full budget for the show selling in their territory, they'll go out and they'll try and distribute it in other territories. In the United States, it's much different. The network will buy up all the rights, because they're the ones who are going to want to sell it in the territories or show it on their networks in different territories, right? So like, if we sell something to Netflix, Netflix is going to want the worldwide rights because Netflix has a worldwide reach. The same with Amazon or Warner Brothers Discovery or basically any network. So it's really different with what the rest of the world is doing versus what we're doing and how we sell shows. So sometimes it can be a little, it takes a little time for international people to understand how the U.S. works and why it's beneficial to sell here in the United States versus trying to just license it for the U.S. and then selling it around the world, because the U.S. is going to put way more money into a show, right? So like, for example, a Shiny Floor show on like Fox, the budget will be anywhere between like $1 million and $1.5 million per episode. You're not going to get anywhere near that in the international market. It's just, the money's just not there. And so it takes a little convincing, but once they understand and they see, oh, really, I didn't realize how much money we could actually get for our show here. They jump right on board.
Yeah, I was gonna talk about that as far as like the comparison between the money, the cost of a mainstream network television show and the cost of a reality show. A lot less.
Yeah, so if you're selling something to a cable network, right? Look, budgets have changed and really have really changed now that we have these streamers coming in, right? Like Netflix will pay a lot more for a show than TLC will. But a budget for like a cable show like that, like if you're selling to Lifetime or TLC or something like that, you're looking at maybe $250,000 to $350,000 an episode, maybe. If it's, a big show and it's got some major names, you're looking at $400,000 an episode, right? It's definitely different than trying to sell to a network or to a streaming platform, right? And the streamers have gone. It used to be like there was a episode of South Park that where I don't remember exactly what the episode was, but like it made fun of Netflix and Netflix greenlighting everything. Since then, Netflix and these streamers have become a lot more selective in what they're buying. So they're buying less, but they're putting more money into the shows that they do buy.
Yeah, I totally get that. You're also you were talking about like YouTube being such a big part of it, and I know you guys are probably researching that, getting into YouTube more. What do you think it is about YouTube that is now so just so like adamant out? It's so popular out there with everybody. How will reality shows be dealing with YouTube?
Yeah, so let me answer that. The first part about that question is, why is YouTube so popular? And this is what I like to tell my clients. So when I first left Verve, I started to develop some shows, and I have like an arcade cabinet that I'm rebuilding, right? Just for fun, like one of those 6-foot arcade cabinets, and it's got a bunch of games on it and everything. And so I needed some parts for it, and I went and I found, this place that sells and rebuilds arcade cabinets. And so I walked in there, and I was blown away. It was like walking into an auto body shop, but for arcades. As somebody who was like at 8 years old was like, one day I'm going to have an arcade cabinet in my house. Like, it was like my heaven. And I was like, this is totally awesome. And as I talked to the people who worked there, the more I found out about it, the more I was like, holy crap, this is a reality show, because it had a bunch of boomer age people that were working there and a bunch of Gen Zers who were working there. So like the dynamic between the two to me seemed really interesting in what looked like it was basically, think of it like an auto show, like counting cars or any car fixer show there is out there. But instead of fixing up cars, you're fixing up arcade cabinets. And I thought this was such an awesome idea. And so I went out and I shot a sizzle and I put together a deck and I started taking it out to production companies, because that's kind of what you do when you're an independent producer. You take it out to production companies that really feel like they would fit that type of show and partner with them to then take it out to a network, because a network's not going to buy a show just from any Joe Schmo off the side of the street. They can't trust you to actually produce the show. but they can trust other production companies that have done it in the past. So that's kind of what you do. Even when you're a high profile, client like I have, like, represent Jack Tarantino, who's an A-list showrunner. Even him, we would partner him with a production company just because, he doesn't have production, what's called production services, right? So like doesn't have the insurance, the ability to hire, payroll, all that good stuff, right? And so I started taking the show out to prominent production companies, and they were all like, this is awesome. We love this. However, we can't sell it. The reason is because it's too niche, right? There's not enough people who are into arcades that would be willing to watch it on television. You have to have really a general audience when you're watching television. However,
right.
YouTube, you don't need to. On YouTube, you can go on there and find tons of channels on arcades. And you don't even need that many subscribers to really make that much money. And when I say that much, like you can make a living if you have a few 100,000 subscribers on your YouTube page. Now, I know that sounds daunting, but like, it's not like you need to have Mr. Beast numbers or something like that, right. 10 million subscribers to really make some money. You can make a living on YouTube with a few 100,000 subscribers. And so that's what I kind of tell my clients is there's a lot of money in this business. And the example I always use is we work with a YouTuber who I will remain nameless, but in the past 2 years, he's kind of grown his channel from nothing to about 650,000, 700,000 subscribers. He's now pulling in $50,000 to $60,000 a month on that channel alone.
Wow.
That's some real money right there. Yeah, it's not joking around money. Like, it's real money. And so that's kind of the reason why YouTube is so great, because you can get into those niches that you normally would not be able to get into. And that's why I think a lot of people my age, millennials and Gen Zs, are really into YouTube, because they can go in and find exactly what they're looking for and watch that, right? Like, you may just be a Disneyland fanatic, right? Like, you might be one of those Disney adults or something like that. There are tons of channels out there that are just about going to Disneyland and like what's happening specifically at Disneyland. We're not even talking about Disney in general or Walt Disney World. We're talking specifically Disneyland. Like, how are they building these new rides? What's coming up? What's happening, right? Like, you can go in there and watch that, and those people make a living doing that, right? Like, they're not going to become millionaires off of it, right? But look, if you have a choice between going into an office for a 9 to 5 or going to Disneyland every day, I mean, personally, I'm going to choose going to Disneyland every day.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways and so many different platforms now that people can make money off of. I mean, we all know that, and it's a lot more than when I was growing up. That's for sure. And anybody can do it. You just have to you have to be serious about it and go out and try it. Now, you're also in development with several shows, Mike. Are those shows like just completely different? Are they a lot of shows from foreign countries that you're trying to get? Are they some from your own ideas, from Bill's ideas? What exactly are you looking at here?
It's literally a mixture of everything, right? So we take a lot of formats from we've got a number of formats from South Korea that we're working on. We've got a number of formats from Japan that we're working on. These are big formats over in those countries that just aren't well known or known out here. So we're working on those. We work with clients to develop their shows, right? So I mentioned Jack Tarantino. He had a show that we sold at the end of last year with a housewife. So we worked to develop that show with them. We develop game shows. So like Bill's huge on TikTok. Like, I don't have TikTok, I refuse to get on TikTok, but Bill is like on TikTok all the time and will send me like at 11:30 at night, because he's just scrolling, will send me a text of like, go find this person. This person needs a show. And we have discussions, and sometimes I agree with him, sometimes I don't. Most of the time he's right. Like, Bill has been in the business for 25 years. There's a reason why he's been able to be in this business for that long, right. And being as successful as he has been, because he's able to recognize talent and recognize shows that even I can't see. And sometimes it'll be flipped the other way, right? Like, we have a show that we're talking with a really big video game company with, that is a really cool idea that Bill just didn't get. I happen to be in the video games. That's what I love doing. If I'm not watching reality shows for work, and I'm not watching YouTube, I'm usually playing video games. Jeff, I'm sure you can hear me yelling and screaming at my computer when I get angry.
Oh, yeah. We can hear you down the block.
Exactly. But it's a really cool idea, and Bill just didn't get it. And I kept pushing and kept pushing and kept pushing and developing it more with our clients. And finally, the light bulb went off on Bill's head, and he was like, oh, okay, I get this now. This is super cool. Let's see what we can do with it, and let's see what pieces we can put into place to really get that checkmate. Because that's really a lot of what this is. It's putting the different the chess pieces on the board in the different positions that you need it, so that you can go out and try and sell that show.
Now you talk about the chess pieces, Mike. So let's get into this a little bit more. Okay, so we know what you want to do and what you and Bill and people in your space are doing to connect people. When you get a show, reality shows, like you said, there's so many different ones out there. There's ones that are coming to you that already have kind of a cast with it, I'm guessing, and then there's others that you have to build out. What is the casting process on whether it's a contestant or it's based on a reality thing? Because some reality shows are really reality. So can you discuss that for a smidget?
Yeah, I mean, look, reality is a generalized term, and this is something that I'll tell you a story from when I was over at Critical Content and I was working with Bill. I was Bill's assistant at the time, and we had sold a show to WeTV with Jason Alexander. And it was basically, we had found this off-Broadway play, and we were going to do a house reality show where we were going to put a bunch of people, a bunch of like C-list celebrities into a house, and they were going to put this play on. It was like their second act. And Bill was like, you want to be a writer, Mike? Why don't you write the show, right? And you're thinking, okay, well, how do you write a show that's a reality show? And this was my first time. I was like, okay, I'll write the show. So I wrote the show as if it was a scripted show, right? Like you have that former A-list talent, and they're now trying to revive their career, and they do their audition, and then they don't get selected for the lead. They now have become the understudy, and so they get all pissed off and they leave, and they start to put on the show, and things start to go wrong. And the very last minute, this former person who left now comes back and is like accepting their place because something, and then something happens to the star and of the show, and this former A-list talent now has to step up, and like everybody lives happily ever after, right? And so I took it to this guy who we worked with, who like basically wrote like all the stuff, like the pitch decks, and like wrote everything and like helped figure out what these shows were going to be. And I took it to him, and he was like, oh no, this is all wrong. Like all this work that you put in, no, this is really bad. Let me teach you the key to reality TV. And this is probably the biggest lesson that I learned when working in reality TV. In reality TV, you put people in situations in order to elicit the reactions that you want, right? Reality TV is just another way to tell stories. And that's what people fail to realize, is that some of it is real, right? But a lot of it is just us putting people into situations so that we can tell the story that we want to tell. And so here's the way we changed that up, right? Because he was like, what's the key piece that you want out of this? And I said, well, I want that talent to get all pissed off and leave and then eventually come back, right? And he's like, okay, great. That's fantastic. I love that. How can we do that with reality shows? And so what we came up with was, we're going to put everybody for these auditions. When you're auditioning for somebody or you're speaking to a crowd, right? They always say, imagine everybody else in their underwear so you're not nervous, right? Well, what if we flipped it on its head? What if we had the person audition in their underwear, right? And you're going to get some people that are going to be like, yeah, this is great, woo, and stripping off their clothes and having fun and having a blast with it. But you're going to get that Asian star that's got, little bit of a belly or some flab right here or something like that. That's going to be absolutely, no, I'm not doing it. And you keep pushing and pushing and pushing until they decide to call their manager, call their agent, say, what did you get me into? This is a bunch of bull. I'm leaving, and storm off set, which is exactly what we wanted. And so that's how reality shows really work, right? You put people into situations in order to elicit the reactions you want.
Right. But it's doing that and being able to edit it and getting the right reactions and all that. You bring me to a point of can you explain what OTFs are?
OTFs. You got
Okay,
to give me
on
a
the
little more
fly.
reference on what you mean.
On the
Oh,
fly, I
on
believe it's called OTFs on the fly. Where something's happening, and are the contestants coached at all in situations like that, or the people are they?
look,
Because look,
they are. I'm going to say that yes, they are. They might be get lines fed to them by the producers,
yeah,
right? It might be something that they say, and the producer says, "Well, that's great. I really like that, but can you say it slightly differently? You're still getting the same message across. You're
right.
just saying it slightly differently." And so a producer is there to produce, right? Like they're there to help their talent bring out the best in their talent. Like these producers that are on reality shows, a lot of them are basically directors. They're directing their talent to get the best performance out of their talent they possibly can.
hmm hmm Yeah, and I never knew of that OTF term either, but somebody threw that at me, so that's why I threw it at you. But because we don't know, sometimes we all watch. There's in every household somebody's watching a reality show somewhere along the way. So there's always people that are thinking like and I was going through my mind here, kind of thinking about it and thinking about what different things I could ask you that I think people that are watching don't really get. Like for instance, if a if a contestant or somebody is making a phone call and then all of a sudden we see who they're making that phone call to and the other person on the other end is picking up the phone call someplace, there's got to be a camera crew or somebody right there knowing they're going to be picking up that phone call. Is that correct, or am I not
You
thinking
know,
this out right, or what?
I have actually never really been in the field of producing. I've always been in development. So like when I'm shooting a sizzle, right? Or I'm cutting a sizzle, or I'm building a deck. I haven't really ever been in the field, so I can't really answer that question on exactly how that works. And I don't want to even try and take a guess to make myself look foolish.
I'll bring you back on that one. I mean, we don't know, because also another thing is, sometimes there's a situation like in a restaurant and all of a sudden a couple of reality contestants or whatever, they just happen to find their way into the restaurant and the lighting's good. So, look, we know it is unscripted, but we also know, you and I know, because it is, you know, television movies, they're make believe, and so we all have to be prepared, no matter what side of the screen we are on. We all have to be prepared, and we know crews are always prepared to go into various locations and trying to figure it all out. It's an interesting business. I mean, across the board. You said it from the beginning. I mean, this is very, very hard, and what we're going through now is everything is shifted. The industry has changed so much. So, what is the pressure for someone like you to develop a show and bring it in, without really kind of worrying too much? I mean, I know you work with Bill, but, there's got to be a lot of pressure because there's so many reality show representatives, producers, what have you, out there now.
Yeah, look, I think the biggest piece of pressure that I'm under, and Bill as well, is just trying to get our clients work. There's not as many
hmm
shows shooting, and there aren't any. There aren't really. I take that back. There aren't any. There aren't as many shows that are selling, like new shows that are selling. So, like, we're lucky. A lot of our clients are either working or in very high demand, right? So there are a lot of incoming call business. However, for a lot of reps out there right now, they're suffering because they can't get their clients on any new shows because there aren't any new shows
Right.
selling. And if you're on a legacy show, you're not leaving that show because the business is totally screwed right now. Like you're going to take a pay cut before you leave that show. It's kind of the same way. It's almost it's almost kind of the same way of what it used to be like to be an assistant in this business, right? When I was coming up in this business and I was an assistant, I was yelled at. I had stuff thrown at me. I had people screaming at me, like cursing me out. Like I went to bed with knots in my stomach because, you know, you're always worried that there's somebody who's going to be next in line, who's right behind you, who's willing to work harder, do more, and do it for less money. And that's kind of the way things have worked out with regards to crew on shows. Mm-hmm. And so the biggest pressure is just trying to get our clients work. And I've got, you know, maybe one or two clients that just haven't worked in a long time. And they're running out of money. And I feel bad for them. I'm like desperately looking for jobs for them. And these are like really good producers. These are like A-list producers that just aren't working. I mean, there was an executive at a network who left the network and is now selling real estate, right? Like it's just people are having to figure out a way to make things work. And that's why I'm pushing a lot of my clients to get into the YouTube space. A lot of them. Trying to figure out what can we do in the YouTube space that's going to make you some money? How can we start some channels with you that's going to make some money so that, you know, not only do you kind of control your own destiny, but you also own all the content that you're creating, right? Like that's one of the great things about YouTube. If you're selling to a network, you don't own it anymore. The network owns it. They're buying up all the rights. They're buying the show. You might get a piece of something if the show sells internationally or it hits a certain amount of episodes or if there's spin-offs and derivatives or whatever it is. But when you're on YouTube, you own every single piece of content that's there. And what's happening now is there are fast channels, and I don't know if you know what fast channel. I assume you know what fast channels are, but for your audience that doesn't know, fast channels are the channels like on like your Vizio, right? That you can turn on, and it's just one. It's like those free channels, right? Like you have the Western channel, or you have the Pets channel, and they just have Westerns on, or they just have Pets on. And these fast channel companies are now just actually because they need so much content right now. They just need content. They're kind of the way that, you know, Netflix was when they were just buying up all these shows because they need content. They're taking content directly from YouTube and putting it together in a fast channel, right? And so they're able to, you don't have to pay anybody for that. You keep all of that revenue because it's your content. You own the channel. And you're also making money past when the show is been aired on YouTube, right? So you'll get people who go back and watch what's called evergreen content, right? You'll go back and get people who will sit down and just watch a playlist of yours that you put together and sit there and watch video after video after video of your content that may have been produced 2-3 years ago, 5 months ago, and that's still making money. And the follow-up question I'm going to assume is going to be like, well, how does YouTube actually make money? How do you make money on YouTube, right? It's through those ad rolls that you see that you either can skip, you know, you can skip that 30-second ad roll after about 10 seconds or 5 seconds, or watch that ad for 15 seconds, that's 15 or 10 seconds long. That's how you make money. It's not the subscriber count that you have. That's great and all. The number one thing that you want is a high view count. You want people watching it for as many people and for as long as possible. The longer that they're going to watch, the more ads they're going to get served. The more ads they're going to get served, the more money you're going to make.
Okay, so you're saying that YouTube puts all those ads on each of these channels?
Yeah, YouTube handles that, and you split the ad revenue with you. You're technically splitting the ad revenue with YouTube, right? Like YouTube is getting some money, you're getting some money, and it's great all around. But yeah, YouTube is handling that. Now, there are other ways that you can do things like you can sell. There are companies that sell advertising that YouTube isn't able to sell for your videos. You'll get some people reading, doing reads, right? So like, hey, this video is presented by Surfshark, and you can get some money from that. But really, the real money comes in from these ad rolls.
Mm-hmm. And how do you push out your YouTube? Like, I mean, because you still have to have some advertising money or something, don't you?
Look, it's that becomes that's the $1 million question, right? Like, how do you get the money to start these YouTube channels? Um, and the best way to do it is to do it as inexpensively as possible, right? We'll go back to that person that I was talking about that's making $50,000 to $60,000 a month on YouTube.
Yeah.
Originally, it was just him and a producer. This guy was prominent. He was somewhat of a name in the industry he was in, but he was definitely not by far the most popular. Like, there are way more popular people in this business, and it was just him and a producer. And what was great about it was it was just him and a camera. He just started talking about answering the internet's top 10 most asked questions about his business. That's how he started. And because he was so captivating and because he was able to give that inside look, they were able to really build and grow their channel and make some money. And that's kind of how it's changed and morphed into not just doing that and answering the internet's top 10 most asked questions, but also doing interviews with people from his industry, right? So like it's morphed into more of an interview show rather than an insider look into this business. That's the key, is to do it as inexpensively as possible.
Yeah, I hear you on that. You know, Mike, it's interesting because, there are, everybody wants content, but yet nobody really wants to pay for things. It seems as though the industry across the board is having problems with, money. And yet there's so many millions and billions of dollars out there, but it's getting the right content to put out there. Um, you know, like how are reality stars, or let's just say reality people in general, how are they paid? Are they does it figure into like what kind of like social influencing they have, or is it just figured out with the show and the budget?
Yeah, it's figured out with the show and the budget, right? So it depends on who you are, right? If you're the main talent for the show, you might get a certain amount. Again, you need to have some sort of notoriety to really sell a reality follow doc show, right? Nobody's going to buy it from some no-name person just because you live an interesting life. It's going to be too
Right.
hard to market. It's going to be too hard to sell to the audience. Like, why am I watching this person? I don't care about them. So they're going to have some sort of like well-known, the best, like, look, the way you sell a TV show, like a scripted show, right? Like if you're a writer, you have to be the utmost number one person to know about that information, right? So like I wrote a pilot on Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff. I spent
Hmm.
8 to 9 months just researching about Bella and Boris. I could tell you anything you wanted to know about Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff. Anything you wanted to know. I became the expert when it came to Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff.
Incredible.
It's the same type of thing in reality, right? Like you got to be the expert in that field, right? Like look at Gordon Ramsay. Gordon Ramsay is a perfect example. He is the expert in what he does. Nobody is as good of a chef as Gordon Ramsay. That's why he's so
Right.
popular, right? Like, and so it's kind of the same thing with reality shows as it is with scripted or anything like that. Got to be the expert. And so people will get paid based on how well they know that subject, right? And look, it might start out that you're not making that much money, right? Like a great example is Pawn Stars, right? Pawn Stars started out where they weren't really making money. Like the people on Pawn Stars weren't making money, but they understand the opportunity there because it became a giant advertisement for gold and silver pawn in Vegas,
Right.
right? To the point where like it's now a tourist attraction, right? People go to Vegas and they're like, oh, I'm going to a pawn store, right? Like I'm going to a pawn shop. I'm not going to go, I can go see the fountains. I can go to Caesars. I can go do this. I can do that. No,
Right.
I want to go to the pawn shop now. And that's what it's become. And so when you're working with a business or something like that, that's one of the things you have to try and get across to them. That like, hey, you might not be making money right now, but a year, 2 years, 3 years later, that's when the money's going to roll in, right? Like understand that this is just one giant advertisement for what you're doing.
Yeah. Look, it's just amazing how, whether it's a reality show or a network television show or a movie, how it influences people and how it influences our minds. Mike, we could talk for hours and hours, and I'd love to have you on again. It's hard to think that we've already been, chatting for about an hour here.
I know.
Do you want to pitch anything? You want to say anything right now before because we do have to
Uh,
wrap it up.
Yeah, yeah. No, thanks so much, Jeff, for having me on. I really appreciate it. This has been awesome. I actually just started a Substack. I don't know if you know what Substack is, to showcase some of my writings, right? Because just like I want to get my art out there, it's really hard to get people to read scripts. So if you go to mrg99.substack.com, you can check out my writing. I'm posting scene by scene of the Bella, starting off with the Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff pilot that I wrote. And I'm also explaining on how and why I wrote it. So it's going to give you some insight into how to properly create characters, tell story, the art of hiding exposition within your plot, that whole thing. So you guys want to check that out? I would love it. I'm never going to charge for my Substack. I'm just going to have it out there because I just want people to see my art. So go check it out, mrg.substack.com. Oh, I'm sorry, mrg99.substack.com.
Great, great. I'm sure the audience will check it out. I certainly will. I'll be talking to you about that because I was I'm a fan of those guys from years and years ago, but I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about it. And Mike, thank you again for coming on. I would absolutely love to have you back and talk more about reality shows and just reality to begin with. So I really appreciate you coming on the show. I want to thank my audience very, very much. Thank you all again for Rolling with Olan, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Take care, guys.